Good morning. My name is Alia Ayers, and I'm the CEO of Mother's Choice. And I'm so excited to see so many of you back today. Yesterday was amazing, wasn't it? Yeah. It was incredible because as the sessions finished yesterday, I had more than one person come up to me and tell me how inspired they were, especially by Dave Anderson's opening keynote speech in the morning. And so many people asked me, would it be possible for us to do something like this in Hong Kong? And it was interesting because I had more than one person also say to me, it reminded me of Hong Kong even a generation ago or 2 generations ago. Stories I heard from my parents or my grandparents of a time when actually Hong Kong didn't have very much money. Not even Li Ka-shing had much money. But it was a time when we did know our neighbors. And we were extended family to the children and families in our community who needed us. And that's really the vision that we have for the Hong Kong of the future, where every child is growing up in a loving family. And that families are defined much more broadly. Families mean love. Families mean commitment. Families mean open hearts and open doors. And where we truly walk out that proverb of it takes a village to raise a child, where we own our community and we see others around us who are hurting and we help them. It reminded me of the second mother that I had growing up. My mom actually had a Chinese mom. Most people are shocked to hear that, but my mom moved here in her early 20s and she had no extended family. After getting married, she had 7 little children and she had no extended family to help her. But there was an older woman in her church who was Chinese, and she kind of adopted my mom. And she looked out for her when there was nobody else to do it. And she's the one who told my mom to keep your hands open in life. Because if your hands aren't open, not only can you not give to others, you also can't receive. And I was reminded of her in hearing so many of the talks that we heard yesterday. I was also blown away by how many of you were really encouraged and helped by the very practical lunch and learn sessions that we had, from how to really hear the voice of a child and give them an opportunity to tell their own story, how to document and evidence the cases that we're working in, how to really identify child abuse, abandonment, and neglect, and know what the laws are in Hong Kong so we can be empowered as frontline workers. How do we measure change and impact? So many of the sessions, how do we work together to really advocate for children? But the unifying thing I heard from people is I could only go to one, and there were others that I wanted to attend. So we're really excited because we want to extend this conference beyond yesterday and today. And I think every single one of the speakers has agreed to do future lunch and learns so that you can go to the ones that you missed yesterday. So if you're interested, please feel free to come to the registration desk during lunchtime or when we have our coffee break, and you can sign up to attend a future lunch and learn for the ones that you missed, which is really exciting. But I think the best news is it doesn't stop. It only gets better today. And so I'm going to hand over to you, Pooja, our incredible host here from HKU and associate professor at the Faculty of Law. You want to share with us what are our highlights for today? What can we look forward to?
Sure, Alia. Thank you so much. Welcome also to all of you on my behalf. So today we're going to continue sort of the conversation around how we can actually achieve permanency in family planning for the children that we work with. And so we're going to pick up on the theme of collaboration that we highlighted yesterday and really get into the details of what it entails and how to make possible these collaborations across different sectors. We have some very motivating examples lined up, and we also have Judith Reiches with us, who's going to share a real-life example of how to work across sectors, recognizing our own individual, professional, or other limitations. And also there will be a panel sharing with you how there are a variety of community resources available already here in Hong Kong. So we're already on the path, really, to multidisciplinary and multi-sector collaboration. And it's really an opportunity, and it's going to be an honor to share with you the work that is being done. And hopefully, we'll be hearing from you on how you think you might be able to get involved in that work. So we're really, really looking forward to it. One thing that struck me that I'd like to share, Alia, when you said we're getting all this energy around, how to think about these issues differently and how we want more, and this is just the beginning. It also struck me yesterday how many of us in the room feel so wedded to our professionalism and the way we ought to be perceived that we sometimes forget that there is a softer side to professionalism too, and that it's okay, right? It's okay to care about your clients. We should care about our clients. It's okay to manifest that care as long as it's done in an appropriate manner. So hopefully we can learn to be a little less rigid in the work that we do too. All right.
So quick reminder, I can see many of you have them already. Our sessions will be both mostly in English but also in Chinese, and if you need a simultaneous interpretation device, they're in the back, and there's also some down here in the front, so please do let us know. If you need translation, somebody will help you. And now it's my great privilege to introduce to you somebody who I respect so greatly. As we talk about child protection this morning and throughout the day, it's all based on the fact that we believe that the best place for children to be protected and to truly thrive in their lives is in the context of a family, a permanent family, a safe family, and a loving family. And here to talk about moving children out of institutionalized care and into family is Joshua Zhang. Joshua is passionate in his belief that no institution can replace the love and care and permanency that comes from family. And it's with this core belief that he founded, together with his wife Lily, Chinese Children Adoption International. It is actually the first ever Chinese-owned and run adoption agency to ever be set up. And they have facilitated the adoptions of more than 12,000 children. In this keynote, Joshua is going to be sharing with us his hope, a hope that he has seen walked out in real life, that every child can have a loving family, no matter how old they are, no matter how complex their situation or circumstances, no matter what their physical ability or special need. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Joshua Zhang. What a challenge you have left us with, Joshua, and how privileged we feel to have you share with us somebody who's considered a real expert on the orphan crisis in China as well as adoption from China. And I know that your organization was ranked by the Chinese government as the #1 adoption agency that they work with. So thank you so much for being willing to share with us. I'm really excited now as we think about practical tools and how to process some of these questions because we have Dr. Judith Reiches joining us as our next keynote speaker. She is an amazing person, a real inspiration to me personally, and she has worked all over the world. She is the program director and manager of international programs at the Institute for Human Services, which is based in Columbus, Ohio. She has been doing this since 1977. She is not only the person who has set up the system for working with children in foster care and how to train and equip frontline workers for the state of Ohio, but she has influenced the model of many of the states across the United States. Not only that, she has collaborated with many nations in Europe, and especially in Eastern Europe and in Africa, many of whom have followed her model. And she's the person who literally wrote the book. She wrote the four-volume resource textbook called The Field Guide to Child Welfare, and she has developed whole libraries online of training and resources and curricula to help people just like you and me. She's probably the smartest person in the room, so it's my privilege to welcome her on up here. And if you could join me in just giving a warm welcome to Judy.
Well, one thing I am not is the smartest person in the room. Maybe about 3 things, but everybody else has a huge amount to offer in this dialogue, as we've seen over the last day and a half. Leah, thank you for inviting me. I'm really, really honored to be here. I have to say this isn't the first time I've been in Hong Kong, but the last time I was here I was 4, and so I really don't remember very much. So this is a rare opportunity for me and a great adventure, and I want to thank Mother's Choice for making this possible. During yesterday's presentations and this morning, we've focused on the point that we have to do certain things in order to ensure that every child, not only in Hong Kong, but around the world, can grow up in a safe, nurturing, and above all, permanent family. And we've talked a lot about the importance of collaboration to enable us to do this. When I was asked to do this presentation, I was asked specifically to speak on the topic of collaboration, and particularly interdisciplinary collaboration, and its role in moving this agenda forward. And because I'm primarily a trainer rather than a presenter, I decided the only way that this was going to work is if I actually trained you in some of the concepts of collaboration so that you can walk out of here knowing something that you didn't know before that you should be able to use when you go back to work tomorrow. Miss Practical. Okay? All right. So I suspect we've all collaborated, and I suspect we've all had very mixed experiences in our attempts to do it. I'm sure you've had your stunning successes, and you've had collaborations that didn't go quite so well. And while we always talk about the benefits of collaborating and the necessity of collaborating, we don't often talk about why it's so difficult. So my goal today is to share information and give you some models of practice that I've found to be extremely helpful in building and sustaining effective collaborations. So to set a framework, I want to start with my conclusions, and then I'm going to look at each of them in more depth. All right, number 1, collaboration really is the best way to achieve a complicated goal, and the operative word is complicated. By the way, you don't have to take pictures of the screen. If any of you want the PowerPoints, you can just give me an email address on your way out, and I'll be glad to email them to you. Okay? Second point, there are different kinds and different levels of collaboration. All collaboration is not the same. And the collaborative structure you choose has to be determined by your goals and objectives. Third one, and I bet a lot of people aren't going to be willing to say this, but collaboration can be risky. In addition to the many benefits, there are real risks when working closely and intensely with people from other systems. And fourth, collaboration is a science as well as an art, and it requires a unique set of knowledge and skills. It's not enough to simply want to collaborate or say you're going to. You have to know how, and you have to learn the skills to be able to do it. So let's start with the first one and go through them in a little more depth. Collaboration is the best way to achieve a complicated goal. You're going to hear this claim in many of the proverbs that infuse all of our cultures. I'm going to give you a few examples. 2 heads are better than 1. No man is an island. And in today's world, it should be 2. No person is an island. Teamwork is the fuel that allows common people to achieve uncommon results. Andrew Carnegie, who was extremely effective in what he did. Individually, we are one drop. Together, we're an ocean. A single tree does not make a forest. A single string cannot make music. This one's my favorite. It comes from Ethiopia. When spider webs unite, they can tie up a lion. And I love the image that creates for me about the power of collaboration. As humans, we really are interdependent, and the more complicated our task is, the more we need to work together to accomplish it. As professionals, we've committed ourselves to the well-being of children, and we've set ourselves out on a very complicated and labor-intensive trajectory, changing how our service systems work so we can ensure permanence in families for all the children currently in care. And I want to explore collaboration in light of that huge, complicated mission. As you all understand from working in the field, the roots of child maltreatment, homelessness, abandonment are complex and deeply embedded in all of our societies, and the contributions include things like poverty. This is the list that you could have written. You all know it. Trauma, family violence, mental illness, substance abuse, lack of education, serious health issues, in some places, war and forced emigration, and a multitude of others. And these factors don't exist in isolation. The effects of any one of them are almost impossible to tease out because they all affect each other, which compounds and makes the whole system and the whole challenge that much more complicated. In the same way, the solutions to these problems are rarely apparent and they're never easy. Achieving permanence in family settings for all the children who come into our care will require large-scale social and organizational change. And of course, achieving this requires the involvement of professionals in many disciplines. All of us in this room represent those disciplines: social work, medicine, education, the legal system, psychology, law, law enforcement, judicial system, child protection, community health, child care, and others. And we're all responsible collectively for the status of the children in our communities. The fact that so many children, hundreds of thousands, as Joshua has just said, in one country, the fact that so many children are in out-of-home and institutional care tells us that something is not working. Even though when I say that, please understand I lay no fault or blame. It's just where we are. And moreover, it's not unique to Hong Kong and not just to China. It's professionals all over the world are facing the same challenges. 20-some years after the Convention on the Rights of the Child, where we all agreed that this was an important thing to do, that we needed to do it, we are still struggling on implementation. My point here, though, is that a lack of collaboration and coordination among professionals does contribute to the problems. Why? Well, when we don't collaborate, families fall through the cracks. Many receive no services at all. They get lost trying to navigate all the complicated bureaucracies that characterize most service systems. They may be assigned 6 different social workers or 6 different professionals in 6 different systems, all of whom see their problem from a different perspective and all of them suggest they do something different. We may spend a lot of money to build competing infrastructures when one would do just fine. And when we spend money to reinvent programs and services that already exist, we don't have enough money to build those services that are needed but that never get developed. I do want to say, again, without blame, it's really easy to get lost in the silos of our own professions. There's an old proverb that you probably all know about the 5, 6 people in a room, all wearing blindfolds, all of them touching an elephant, and everybody describing the elephant totally differently because, of course, they're touching different parts of the elephant. Nobody's seeing it as a whole. Ask each one of us in a different profession what's wrong in our society, and we're going to be eloquent in explaining the problems as they appear in our own fields of practice. But it's much harder to explain and understand the challenges faced by our colleagues in other disciplines. And because of that, it's also much easier to cast blame. In our own defense, to be really effective in our own professions, we have to be specialists. We spend our lives digging deeply into our own professional areas of knowledge to increase our competence and improve our effectiveness, and that's really critical. But doing that makes it impossible for us to understand how our work interfaces with the work of others. And again, it's nobody's fault, because it's really, really hard to be vigilant looking inward and building our own professional capacity, and being equally good at looking outward and understanding what's going on around us at the same time. You can't, it's really hard to do both, to have that kind of focus. But to meet our mission of permanence for all children, as we become more effective in our own spheres, we have to coordinate what we do with others and integrate our work into a larger whole. Coordination is about people getting along and working together. The point here is integration of what we do so that it works together into a more systemic, more effective whole. If we don't do that, our communities look like a patchwork quilt of helpers and services, and families will suffer as a result of just the sheer disorganization, in spite of all of our best intentions. Have any of you ever tried to navigate the complexities of some of our service systems on behalf of our clients? I have a PhD. I'm a case manager. There have been times I have been reduced to tears because it is so complicated. And I don't understand how families can possibly do it. So there really is no other way to succeed but to collaborate on large, long-term system change. That's the operative word, large, long-term system change. The unique characteristics of our agenda demand it. So now that I've said that, instead of taking me at my word, I'm going to tell you why that's true. First off, there's simply way too much work to do for any one person, one group, one discipline, for anybody to do by ourselves. Large-scale change requires a very large workforce, intervening in all parts of the community and the service system all at the same time. Too much work, need a lot of people. Second, the work itself is inherently very, very complicated, which requires a whole range of widely different knowledge, skills, and experiences. In order to do it well, we need to draw on the decades of specialized experience that exists and is built up within each of the professional disciplines that's working in this area. Third, individually, no one will ever have enough resources to do the necessary work. Now, if I'm being honest with you, even when we all work together, we will still never have enough resources to meet all the need and to do all the work that we do. But collaboration helps us prioritize use of those resources, and I don't mean just financial resources, I mean people resources too, in order for us to have the greatest impact. Fourth, consider this, we're going to talk more about it in a bit. Even though we're all well-educated and highly trained people, we still have blind spots in our thinking. We're shaped by our own personalities and our backgrounds and our cultures. And we all have different perspectives and different points of view. In collaboration, this isn't a failing. This is actually one of our greatest strengths. And it behooves us to draw upon each other's knowledge and expertise, because none of us can have the answer, because the question is way too complicated. We need the involvement and input from everybody who has information and experience and something to say on the topic. Fifth one is really important when you're thinking about moving from, vision to implementation. People are far less willing to invest in a new initiative when they've had no say in its design. So we need people to invest in this cause if it's going to work. And working together from the beginning is the best way to ensure long-term commitment to effective and sustainable implementation. I would love to spend an entire hour talking to you about implementation and the strategies of it. We don't have time to do that, but put that on your to-do list, sort of your parking lot here. The whole concept of implementation science and what has to happen in order for great ideas to actually be put into practice. So this brings us to point number 2. There are different types and levels of collaboration, and all of them are dependent on the task at hand. So through all of this, let's collaborate, it may sound like I'm saying that we pull a large group of people together to make every decision, and I'm not saying that at all. As we all well know, sometimes forming a committee to solve a problem just slows us down and gets in our way. So let's think about another old joke. Whoops. How many people does it take to change a light bulb? Does that joke exist in Hong Kong, or is that just a US? Okay? All right, so here's what happens when we assign a committee to this job. One person goes around and finds all the burned out light bulbs in the building. A second person gathers data to decide which replacement bulbs are the best ones. Third person writes the purchase order and allocates the funds. Fourth person drives to the store and buys the replacement bulbs. Fifth person actually unscrews the old bulbs and screws in the new ones. And a sixth person holds the ladder. The seventh person, probably a supervisor, will provide oversight and will do a follow-up evaluation to determine whether we can now see clearly through the darkness. Okay? Silly example, but in giving this straightforward task to a committee, we've created a bureaucracy, and the large expenditure of time and resources for this task just is not warranted. The problem had a straightforward and simple solution, did not need a group decision, did not need a group to figure it out. Okay? So group decision making was the wrong solution to that problem. Yet, when you talk about collaboration, you're going to find people who value collaboration for its own sake. It's really a wonderful thing. They form committees to achieve buy-in or investment, so everyone feels involved. Everyone feels personally content and fulfilled. In these circumstances, this attempt at collaboration is neither effective nor efficient. Okay? Collaboration is not a unitary thing. It's not one animal. It can exist in many forms, and the type of collaboration strategies you choose should be suited to the problem you're trying to solve. So, talking about practicalities, I want to share the first of several models that I'm going to be talking about. This one is a model of decision making, and it spans a continuum of options. I don't know how many of you may have seen this before. There are lots and lots of models of decision making. I like this one because it's really pretty crystal clear. It provides 4 categories of decision making. Okay? First one's autocratic, and it's exactly how it sounds. A single person has ultimate responsibility for a decision, and they make it. They make that decision based on their own knowledge and judgment. That's simple. Got to make a decision? Go ahead and do it. Second one is consultative. In this case, the person who has decision-making responsibility asks for input from other people who may have more knowledge or more experience on the topic than the decision maker does. And the reason that we do this is to improve legitimacy of our own decisions by making sure we have a lot of information that we wouldn't necessarily get on our own. So we ask for consultation from other people. Okay? Third type's called group decision making. In this case, the person with decision-making responsibility involves others, and here's the important point, shares the responsibility. It's not simply getting information anymore. At this point, we are sharing the authority and the responsibility to make a decision. And this not only brings in important information, but it dilutes the weight of personal responsibility that sometimes comes with making very difficult decisions. This is where you see decision-making you see in executive teams or boards. The fourth type, the responsible person decides she doesn't need to be involved in this decision at all. And in fact, she delegates both responsibility and authority to other people and is willing to live with whatever they decide. Why does this matter? Everything you do, whether you're doing casework, management, working in a hospital, you have to understand what authority you have for what decisions you are responsible for, whether you should be making them alone and whether you should be making them with other people, and which ones you shouldn't be making at all and can just hand off to somebody else. And a lot of conflict that you find in organizations is because people don't have a clear idea of their own scope of decision-making, authority, and responsibility. Creates lots of operational problems, lots of conflict. But it's a death knell for collaboration. Okay? Understand, in this model, the last three types are all collaborative decisions. What differs is the degree to which both, here are the important terms, both responsibility and authority for those decisions are shared among different people. And in fact, that's what collaboration really is. It's sharing authority and responsibility for important decisions to move your agenda forward. The real skill is knowing what type of collaboration is best suited for different circumstances. And I want to tell you there's a science to govern this, and it can be learned. In complicated change initiatives like what we're talking about, I really have found number 3, group decision-making, to be extremely effective. Sometimes these groups are called steering committees, guiding groups, strategic planning teams. You've all heard of them. Each member of the group has his or her own responsibilities independent of the group. They're still doing their own work. But the group makes decisions together that can coordinate and integrate everyone's work into an effective and efficient whole. And that greatly increases success. These large-scale, complex, collaborative structures have several common elements. First of all, they involve members from all parts of the system. They have a shared and clearly articulated vision, mission, and goals that drive all the group's decisions and activities. They make these together, and it becomes the touchstone for everybody's work. So everybody's working from the same book. They then jointly develop a strategic plan that actually shapes and guides all of their activities. And they clearly delineate their roles and responsibilities, both alone and in conjunction with other people. And that includes the scope of their decision-making authority. So everybody knows where they fit, what they're to do, what they do on their own, what they do collaboratively, and who those other people are. There's also a formal structure and standards for negotiation, for consensus building, another word that I'm going to keep referring to, decision-making, and conflict resolution. They have a formal structure to govern the funding and sharing of resources. So it's all pre-planned out, based on logic. A structure that provides for coordination and integration, and a structure that ensures self-evaluation and continual planning. The reason I'm raising this is that you're looking at long-term strategic change. This kind of structure, this large, formal, collaborative structure, really can bring about lasting change, but they're the most challenging to set up and to sustain. But trust me, I've done it. It's absolutely worth it. Amazing things can happen with these kinds of teams. Before we go there, we have to look at the dark side. Collaboration can be risky, and let's, say it like it is. In most collaborative efforts, there are risks to the people involved. Collaboration in social systems is really a delegation and sharing of authority, which basically means a sharing of power. So collaboration you can experience it as positive when you stand to gain power and influence from the collaboration. And it can feel very threatening when you stand to lose power and influence or something else. However, having power isn't all it's cracked up to be at times, because if you are perceived as in control and in charge and having responsibility, you can also be blamed when it doesn't go well. So we are all very ambivalent in collaborations about power and authority and how much to have and the risks, the dangers of either having it or not. Likewise, when we collaborate in making important decisions, we don't always have control over the outcomes. Sometimes things can go in a very different direction than what we would have liked. We can even feel used or abused if we feel we're doing all the work and others are getting all the credit. We also face a potential risk when we share resources, especially in systems that are chronically underfunded and always begging for resources. Does that sound familiar? That is us. The risk is always that our own resources will be cut or diverted. People's jobs may change, they may cut, we may lose things that we have spent years trying to develop. And there are psychological risks as well. We fear losing status, influence, positional power that it's taken them years to build. Joshua's example of people in the orphanages, this is exactly what you just said 3 minutes ago. A changed agenda may mean you lose the ability to do what you believe in your heart is right. And sometimes people fear, maybe realistically, being pushed aside, ignored, or replaced. These fears may or may not be warranted, but we've got good reason to have them. Over the millennia, as humans, we've become hardwired to be cautious. Our ancestors knew that that group of strangers coming up over the hill weren't always friendly. More likely, they'd be here to take our food, take our land, take our livestock, sometimes even kidnap us to be slaves. So we've learned to be suspicious of people we don't know, because at times our survival depends on it. So we don't have to be ashamed of the fact that we're suspicious. It's normal and it's human. So even as we have the veneer of civilization and politeness to mask our suspiciousness, our more primitive brains are always scanning the environment, trying to determine if the stranger sitting across the table from us is friend or foe. So, being cautious and suspicious is normal, but with proper leadership and facilitation, groups can and very often do get past this initial distrust and develop the ability to work comfortably in collaboration with each other. Which brings me to point number 4. There is a way to do this, and it is a science as well as an art. I want to share some insight into some of the barriers to effective collaboration and some of the models that can help us do it more effectively. So let's start by talking about communication. You'd think that would be really easy, right? Well, it's not. People have very different communication styles based on individual temperaments, cognitive style, sometimes cultures. Although you're going to find, even within cultures and even within families, you're going to find people have different communication styles. And the most important point about this is that differences in communication style can, by itself, create conflict and misunderstanding. And I want to show you how that works. Okay, another model. This one is, there are many models in the literature on communication styles. I like this one. It seems to fit. And it seems to fit for me across cultures. 4 different styles: direct, supportive, emotive, and reflective. And while I'm talking about this, I'd like you to see if you can identify your own and the style of people you know. For direct communicators, what is most important is the accuracy of the message itself. Direct communicators, I am one, are usually governed by fact, logic, and reason, and they get right to the point. They are task-oriented. I should say we are task-oriented. Communication for us is a means to get to action, and we tend to tell it like it is. As is true for all the styles, direct communicators can be misinterpreted by others. We're often experienced as talking at you rather than talking with you. We give lectures rather than having conversations. We're thought to be abrupt, arrogant, unwilling to listen or hear anybody else, and we're sometimes seen as autocratic or authoritarian. Hold that thought. Second style is, anybody else in here a direct communicator? All right, a few of us are willing to admit it, right? Okay. Supportive communicators, primarily relationship-oriented, focused on how other people are feeling. They promote equality in communication. They value give and take. It's your turn, and then it's my turn, and then it's your turn, and then it's my turn. And gee, what do you think about it? And now it's my turn to say, okay? Their main point, especially if it's a controversial one, is couched in softer, indirect language. Rather than saying, you need to go shut the door, it's like, you know, it's actually a little breezy in here, and I'm wondering if it's because the door is opened, and do you think maybe somebody ought to go and close it? So if you're a direct communicator listening to a supportive, you're going to be impatient, and you're likely to wonder, yeah, so what's the point? Where are you going with this? The supportive communicator's attempts to make people feel comfortable and involved will seem to us like unnecessary digressions and irrelevant to the topic at hand. But if the direct communicator tries to get the conversation back on track, the supportive communicator is going to feel they've been derailed by an autocrat who wants to run the show. Okay? Any of you supportives? Okay, cool. All right. That means a lot of you, the rest of you are either emotive or reflective. I don't know here. Emotive communicators are really tuned into feelings. All right? They see things through the lens of their own personal experiences. They speak with great passion and elaborate detail, and they're often spontaneous. They jump into conversations in the middle to tell you what they saw and what they felt. You give them and it's, oh, I know that. I saw that the other day. I was out in so-and-so, and this happened, and I couldn't believe it was really happening, and oh my God, it was awful, and okay? To a direct communicator, emotive communicators are literally all over the place. I mean, it's like a ping pong ball. You can't figure out where they're going. They give you lots and lots of detailed information, but they can't seem to follow a line of logic or reason. It's there, but you don't see it in the communication. And much of the time, you don't really understand, you meaning as the direct communicator, you don't understand what they're trying to tell you, much less why. Okay? Any emotives in here? Come on, we know you're here. All right, great. Okay. Our artists are emotives. People, expressive. Poets are emotives. It's not a bad thing. So a supportive communicator might be frustrated by the emotive communicator's monologue, seemingly unable to hear. They don't do the give and take because they're all off in whatever they see. So the emotive communicator may seem to be one-sided and oblivious to other people's ideas. And then we have reflective communicators. Reflective communicators rarely say anything until they've thought about it for a while. Any of you in here? Okay. They spend more time listening, tend to be introspective, and are often quiet in groups. speaking up only when they're ready, and it's easy for people with other communication styles to overlook them or drown them out, causing the group to miss out on essential and well thought out input. And I just realized I am 4 behind on the slides. Okay. Because of their quietness, they can be misinterpreted as not being interested, having little to offer, or at worst, being resistive. And if you ask them a direct question or push them to say something, they tend to withdraw and become even more quiet. Okay? So we're going to do a mental exercise here. We're going to form a team. We're going to put these 4 hypothetical people in a room together and ask them to solve a problem. And as they talk, let's assume each one of them interprets all the others through the lens of their own preferred communication style. So, what are these 4 people likely to say about their colleagues? Well, they're abrupt, arrogant, bossy, individualistic, dictatorial, can't get to the point, unconcerned about others, insensitive, rambling, unfocused, resistive, and passive. And is it any wonder why they don't get along? Okay? We don't know anything about these people. We don't know anything about what they think or what they want or what they feel. It's simply they have a different communication style that is misinterpreted by the rest of us because we don't know there is such a thing as different communication styles. Probably one of the most important points in any kind of group work is to recognize this and prevent it from happening. And you do that by something called style flexing. First task, know your own style. Recognize your own style. Some of us have more than one style. You'll always have a preferred style. Remember that the style does not define the person. And the skill you need to avoid this pitfall is style flexing, which is actually modifying your own style so it fits better with the style of the people that you're talking to. Sometimes you mirror their style. So you communicate the way they do, or you just allow them to be who they are. Before I understood communication styles, being a direct communicator, I'd find myself in conflict with other people all the time, and I'd have no idea what had happened. I had no idea what I'd done wrong. And again, it's because I was being interpreted through my style from people who didn't know me, didn't know anything about me. But once I understood communication styles, it made it easier for me, first of all, to explain my communication style to other people. Some of the people in this room probably remember my saying at the very beginning, just incidentally, I'm a direct communicator. I'm going to say it like it is, and if that bothers you, you need to tell me. And kind of pave the way by explaining to others what your style is. So the point here is a little understanding about these differences and a tolerance of people's diversity will go a very long way to preventing misunderstanding and unnecessary conflict, and is essential in promoting collaboration. All right, another concept in communication called dialogue. Another model, very helpful in developing cohesive groups. It's no accident that you see the word dialogue in the conference title. In English, there are several words that describe a process for talking together. They include words like conversation, discussion, discourse, debate, dialogue. But there can be subtle differences in dynamics among them. In some conversations, you're going to see strong elements of persuasion as people try to convince others about the rightness of their own positions or their thoughts. And these conversations sometimes devolve into arguments or debates. And a debate actually is nothing more than an argument that is regulated by rules so it doesn't deteriorate into a fistfight. Dialogue is unique. In a dialogue, there is no attempt to persuade or shape other people's feelings or their thinking. The single goal of dialogue is to understand each other. You believe each person has equal right to speak. Each person's thoughts and feelings are equally important. They need to be heard. Everyone has equal responsibility to learn and understand about each other. You want to know their vision, their beliefs, their assumptions, their experiences, their values and concerns. Therefore, the primary communication strategy in dialogue is listening. It's an essential strategy for team building. It helps people better understand each other's perspectives and then builds confidence and trust because you do understand each other. And it also makes us aware of things we may never have thought about that are really important as we move forward. Dialogue also helps us recognize the commonalities lying under the superficial differences. Making dialogue a primary mode of information sharing will help you move ahead as partners. Once you've mastered dialogue, you've got a good foundation on which to build two other essential strategies for effective collaboration. Remember, I flagged the words before: negotiation and consensus building. And this three-pronged strategy, dialogue, negotiation, consensus building, is the decision-making strategy and the standard for the highest functioning teams. This is how they operate. And that's how they can get things done. All right, I want to expand on what I said earlier about the importance of having people with different views and perspectives involved in complex decision-making. As a contrast, I want to describe what can happen when groups suppress conflict and they don't allow divergent opinions and they ignore their blind spots and they aren't willing to listen to each other. Any of you heard of groupthink? Okay, it's a concept you need to know. The term was coined by a psychologist named Irving Janis back in 1972, and it describes a potential risk of group decision-making. So here's what it looks like. The conditions to develop it are homogeneous in composition. Everybody in the group's the same. They're insulated from outside opinions. There's nobody out there challenging what they're saying. And there are no clear rules to govern how decisions are made. No rule for critical thinking. The group leaders and members suppress dissent. If you have a differing opinion, you're subtly punished for it. Because people in these homogeneous groups largely share the same views, they adopt this illusion of unanimity. We are all in agreement. That means everybody is in agreement. And it means that this is right. And in the worst cases, it means our conclusions and decisions are the moral ones. Okay? At worst, they also develop what's called an illusion of invulnerability. That means nobody can touch them because they're so sure they're right. Everybody out there's got to be wrong. We are right, so we are invulnerable. And it encourages sometimes unrealistic risk-taking. Groupthink, by definition, evolves because groups function in what I call a vacuum of their own making. Okay? They insulate themselves, and they ignore warnings that something's potentially wrong with their thinking. I'm going to give you a really quick example of how this works. I recently saw it work in operation in the past 10 years in a large-scale child welfare reform movement in the U.S. called differential response. Here's how it went, short version. A small group of family advocates appointed themselves to be the guiding group for this reform effort. They had it all figured out. They held conferences for advocates who believed as they did, and they openly criticized and demeaned or disgraced anyone who challenged them. We tried and we got slammed. They were so certain they were right. There were warning signs that their model was flawed. But they chose to ignore the signs. They continued to reinforce each other's belief in the rightness of their cause. All right? They are Don Quixote now, jousting at windmills. It reached a point where they even co-opted researchers who published outcome studies with very weak and equivocal results, but who still promoted these studies as gold standard research, proving that the reform model worked. Well, the risks and dangers that were so clear to others did finally get them in the end, and a promising program went down the tubes. And many children had died as a result of this, or were hurt when they didn't need to be. But this was only after many, many child welfare systems had completely retooled all of their operations at a cost of many millions of dollars. It was a classic example of groupthink, and it reaffirmed for me that open and respectfully managed controversy, governed by dialogue and a willingness to look at an issue from all perspectives, is really the best way, and sometimes the only way, to achieve a rational, sensible, and realistic plan. So be cautious of this. Don't fear controversy. Controversy keeps us healthy, on target, alive, and probably effective. It's not having it that's the problem. It's how you handle it and manage it that makes the difference. All right, I want to do one more model. And that speaks to the development of effective groups and teams. There is a science to this also. It's called the stages of group development. To be effective team leaders, facilitators, and even team members, we all need to understand and act on these principles. The model I'm going to share delineates the normal stages of development of any group. It could be a therapy group, it can be a task group, it can be any kind of group. But what's important is how these stages affect communication and member behavior and ultimately a team's effectiveness. What you see on my PowerPoint is a merger of two of the models that I've used. They're fairly similar. They just use different terminology. Okay? First one's called forming. At this stage, you likely have a collection of individuals all sitting together in a room and talking. They're not yet a group, and they're certainly not yet a team. Ambivalence is the norm at this stage. People are on the fence. They don't know whether to join. They don't know whether they want to stay. They don't want to approach. They don't want to avoid. They're not sure what to do. All the potential benefits of being in the group will get them there. But whether they choose to stay or not will depend upon whether the benefits actually become, whether they actually are materialized, and the level of risk they perceive, and whether the benefits outweigh the risks. Ultimately, they want to know things like this. Can the group really do what it set out to do? Will I feel respected and valued? Will there be a meaningful role for me? Will I be comfortable? Can we really work together? Is it worth my time? They're wait and see. For the first several meetings, they'll be polite, careful about what they say, sometimes distant. The conversation may feel stiff and awkward, as it does when you're in a new group of people, just like nobody understands what's expected. If you're the team leader or facilitator, you need to acknowledge that the ambivalence is normal and expected. As I'm thinking about this isn't all that different from the first contact a social worker is going to have with a new client. You're not yet a team either. Okay? And some of these same kind of dynamics and the same kind of feelings affect the casework relationship as well as team relationships and group relationships. So as a facilitator, you need to acknowledge that ambivalence is normal. And you need to allow enough time to work through it without worrying that you're moving too slowly. Your strategy is to promote dialogue and respectful listening, which is always the first thing you do in a social work relationship with families too. You do a lot of listening and a lot of dialogue. And you begin to understand each other and the purpose of why you're there. Over time, as you get to know each other and begin to develop greater trust, you see the group, the people making decisions to either commit and stay and move ahead with the group, or they leave. Okay? Stage 2, called storming. Okay? And it does reflect what happens. It has a subtitle of power and control. Much of the ambivalence in stage 1 comes from not knowing where the power lies and how it's going to be used or whether it's safe to be in the group. The focus of stage 2 is working this out. In casework, this is where your client's going to start testing you. Okay? As people in groups become more comfortable, group members start testing each other. They test the group leader. They want to get an idea of where they fit, the power structure, where they fit in it. They start being more willing to offer dissenting opinions. They start disagreeing with each other. You begin to see conflicts acted out, sometimes overtly, sometimes under the radar. Either way, the conflict is experienced as a barrier to moving forward. Effective team leaders can help groups through this stage, and believe me, they are not comfortable. You feel like the world is falling apart. Everybody's mad at each other, and you cannot move ahead. Okay? But dialogue the issues. It'll help everyone understand everyone else's needs and concerns. Why are you so upset? Tell me what you're thinking. What's making you angry here? What don't you get? And listen. So engaging people then to help negotiate power balances. All right, what do we have to do here to make sure that everybody feels safe and nobody feels that they're going to be taken advantage of? And you allow people opportunities to express their dissenting views without being punished by the group. As a facilitator, I really want to hear what you have to say, even if it's not a popular opinion. There's a little bit of truth in everything everybody says. I want to know what you know. And eventually, as people learn to trust each other, they then get impatient and ready to get down to work, at which point you are in the norming stage. And this is where you can actually start setting standards for group operations. It answers questions like, all right, what's going to be our operating structure? How are we going to communicate? How are we going to organize ourselves? How do we present our ideas? How do we deal with confidentiality? What can each of us bring to make this group work? What's my unique role and contribution? Who has expertise on what topics and can lead on those topics? How can we be sure that everyone will be equally respected? And how can we make decisions when we don't all agree? Working through all of these issues as a group and setting norms to govern group behavior builds relationships and confidence. And in my mind, it is only at this stage when real affiliation takes place. Okay? Now, the group could still go downhill from here, especially if the norms and standards set by the group fail to promote the kind of behaviors that support effective collaboration. And that's a really important point. Okay? You can set all kinds of restrictive norms. You know, people have to talk on a schedule. You're going to do everything by a vote, even if it bothers people. The group isn't going to work. So there are principles of teams that you have to imbue in your teamwork in order for it to stay together. But if it's there, you will have the glue that allows you then to work together, which is, of course, number 4, performing. You've been through 3 stages, and only now is the group really getting down to the work it was set up to do. That should reassure you not to get upset if you're in early stages of groups and nothing seems to be happening. All groups work through these stages. They may look different in different groups. Some groups, if people really know each other and trust each other, are going to move through some of the early stages much faster. Other groups are going to be stuck in power and control forever. But in order to move it, and to move it well, you need expert facilitation and leadership, which is, again, why I say this is a skill and a science. And to do this well, you need people who are trained facilitators and trained in leadership in order to help groups move this. Understanding the natural stages of group formation can help grow and nurture teams. After months or years of working together, teams can evolve into well-oiled machines, and their effectiveness will increase. I wouldn't ask you to do something I haven't done myself. Our own team at home celebrated its 30-year anniversary the end of last year. This is a collaborative team that's run a training system for the entire state of Ohio for 30 years. 11 partner organizations. Nobody believed it would work, neither did we, but it did. And it really convinces you of the power of teams when they achieve this high-level stage of performing. All right. Even with all this in mind, in the name of collaboration, organizations convene a group of people, call them a team, give them an assignment, and then, without strong facilitation or leadership, the group flounders, falls apart, often in stage 2, overpower. The other side is they all stay together, but nothing ever gets done. You meet and you talk and you meet and you talk and you never move forward. And the problem is probably somewhere in the stages of group development. My point is, if you want to collaborate effectively, you need the skills to be both a strong team leader, facilitator, and an equally strong team participant. In well-functioning, mature teams, there is not one leader. Leadership is shared. If you have the expertise and the knowledge on a particular topic, you lead that discussion, you lead that initiative. And it really gets, you can do much more work done. At that point, you have several individual groups, subgroups, work teams, spinning off, working on their own, and you're not afraid the group's going to fragment and fall apart because they're all linked into this whole. But leadership comes from within, and anybody in the team can be and should be the leader and the facilitator in their own area of expertise. But we all need to understand how groups operate, we all need to understand stages of development, and we all need to be able and willing to facilitate our way through the tough times and help each other do that. And that will forge successful collaboration. I want to make one more point before I close. We've been talking about collaboration as a very important part of our work, but I want to stress one important thing. Collaboration is not our goal. Collaboration is only a means to an end. It's not the end itself. Our real desired outcome is change, strategic, long-lasting change to ensure that children can grow up in safe, permanent, and loving families. Transforming our complicated service systems to achieve this is truly a lifetime of work. And if we're really honest, we have to admit that even in the best of circumstances, we may never completely achieve our goal. But we can achieve permanence for a lot of children, one child and one family at a time, simply by putting the best systems in place to allow this to happen. Large-scale system change is created through a whole series of smaller, incremental changes, each of which can have some positive effect on its own, and the effect is magnified when each of these pieces eventually gets linked into all the others. But to even make these smaller changes, we need to understand the theory of strategic change and how it applies to our work. And I had hoped to actually take you through some of the basic principles of change leadership and change theory, but there isn't enough time. But like collaboration, you need to understand that strategic change is a science as well as an art, with clear principles and strategies to guide and shape the work. And strong leaders can use this science to plan and implement change in constructive ways, using skills like enabling, empowering, facilitating, educating, supporting, and by generating a commitment to a common vision of a reformed and healthy system that meets kids' needs and gives them hope for their futures. All of us need to be effective change leaders because each of us leads in some context, in our units, in our organizations, in our professions, in our communities. It's a skill. We need to learn it. We need to get good at it. So I want you to take two things away from this presentation. First one is the conviction that the only way to plan, organize, and lead complex, large-scale change initiatives is to lead through collaboration. It provides the glue that holds colleagues, organizations, professions, and communities together when the going really gets tough. And trust me, the going will get really tough. And all we have to rely on to get through it is each other. And having that kind of collaboration offers the very best chance of succeeding. If you collaborate well, you'll be rewarded by what we call the genius of the group. If you work as high-functioning teams, you'll have a greater understanding of the context for your work, a clearer, better articulated sense of your mission. You'll make better, fully informed decisions. Fully informed, meaning we've got all the information and none of us can gather it alone. We'll each have support for each other in difficult times. And while each of us may be really, really good at what we do, only together can we reach the status of genius. And my second point is that good intentions are not enough. To do this well, Everyone involved must be skilled in competencies related to change theory, team building, group development, facilitation, strategic planning, and again, as I said earlier, implementation science, which is a whole technology of its own. You have people in your community who have these skills, and I would bet some of them may be you. Recognize this truth, prepare yourselves before you jump in and try to undertake a full-scale collaborative project. Adequate preparation, knowledge, and skill will not only help you succeed, it will also keep you from scaring yourselves to death. So collaboration is possible. I suspect with will, skill, and an ethical imperative to do the very best you can for Hong Kong's children, you will together find ways to succeed. I wish you absolutely the best as you continue this challenging but very exciting journey. Thank you.
Now, Judy, I hope you don't mind staying up there for a couple more minutes, because I think we have some time for some questions.
Cool. Or comments, or feedback. In a dialogue, you're welcome to disagree with me.
Good morning, I'm Peter from Hong Kong Student Society. Hong Kong Student Society is actually running a range of residential childcare services in Hong Kong. We have foster care. We have, in Hong Kong, we call it small home for 8 children living together under a couple. We have large homes. And we use a lot of adoption services, such as from actually mother choice. I have 2 feedback and some thoughts actually to the presentation by Reverend Joshua. I remember a donor comes to me. Actually, he came to me about a few weeks ago. He has a sum of money, quite handsome sum of money, to be donated to my society. But the condition is, I have to give this sum of money to orphans. Only orphans. And I checked with my staff, I have altogether 312 children in my care. And my staff told me that none of them is orphan. So what we are doing in Hong Kong now is, I think roughly less than 5% are orphans on the whole. What we are doing is a lot of children aged from 0 to 21, with multiple family and maybe individual and personal problems, such as ADHD, attention deficit, hyperactivity syndrome, autism, and a lot of terms you can use, more than me actually. So the problem is, first of all, if you think about permanency, I totally buy with idea that adoption is the best. But the problem in Hong Kong is, I visited LA, Los Angeles, a couple of years ago. They have a law, something like this. If a parent, if a couple cannot take care of their children adequately, then after a certain period of time, say 1.5 years, the courts can move in. But in Hong Kong, I see a lot of parents, they don't want to sign off their custody right, but they never, if not seldom, if they never or seldom visit their children, even during Chinese New Year. So our problem in Hong Kong is like this. Another thought is about foster care. People mention about there are 60 children, being kept in hospital. I'm afraid to say that they are very hard to place cases, or else why they are still kept in hospital. Why foster care can admit them, why even the last home can actually take care of them. I'm afraid there are those children kicked out of all this care. So what we can do, I was in Scotland a few years ago. I visited a site, a large center, in which there are many foster homes. They say foster home. I don't know where they're putting together. But with a central support of, paramedical team like CP, clinical psychology, speech therapy, physical therapies, etc., etc. And they work in that way. I wonder whether we can work in Hong Kong in that way. In the night that Hong Kong land is very expensive, but just some thoughts for everybody here to think about what we can do further. Thank you.
Peter, thank you so much, not only for sharing your thoughts, but for all the work that you do for hundreds of children each year in Hong Kong through different forms of residential care. And I'm going to hand over to the expert in a second, but there's clearly multiple approaches to this. I mean, I was very inspired to hear from Dr. David yesterday that adoption and foster care are not the only options. There's so much that we can do to support birth families, to strengthen birth families so that foster care or adoption aren't necessary. What can we do to invest in them first? And we share the experience of sometimes donors who aren't educated or don't understand the issues want to give to the wrong things. I also think that there's ways for us to make foster care more effective. And I'm really excited because right after the coffee break, actually, Judy is going to be facilitating a panel with IFSC representatives, with medical care representatives, with legal representatives, as well as with institutionalized and therapeutic care representatives to talk about how can we actually collaborate together to make sure that children in foster care do get access to services. And then, ultimately, as Reverend Joshua really did challenge us, we are, even when children are in foster care and it's the best foster care available, it is not the end. The strategic change that we're looking for is permanent family. And I really hope that you can all stay through the rest of the day because we're going to be talking about very practical skills and examples, even in Hong Kong, where we've been able to navigate. Not we, I mean we as a team here have been able to navigate through some of those same challenges you just described.
Other comments or questions or thoughts? I bored them all into submission.
Hi, good morning, Dr. Judith. I'm May, Asian Charity Services. Thank you so much for your presentation. I learned a lot. And the communication style explanation and the team forming was really, really brilliant. I think just to really think back to the local Hong Kong context is the practice or the culture of collaboration or coming together as a team. I think we're still learning. We're still trying to really just think of how do you even begin to engage each other. So my question to you is that before you even talk about communication style or any of the forming, what would be your suggestion in terms of just how to begin to engage and even just test some waters? Who should come together and actually start that dialogue and what are some helpful processes or skills, right, that would enable that?
Well, you're asking an American who will talk to anybody. Hey, how are you? I'm interested to know. No, seriously, is there somebody in this community, you've always wondered what they do? And how would they feel if you called and said, hey, I'm so-and-so from such and such. I know you work in this other organization. I honestly don't know much about what you do. Would you have time to educate me? Can I come over and look around with you and have you tell me what? And then just say, I want to learn from you. I want to know what you have. And hopefully, if you choose the right person, they're going to say, well, what's your perspective on this? You just you literally want, if you believe and live and breathe collaboration, this is a hard lesson, you will learn early on that your work is so much better if it involves other people. I mean, we like to think we know it all. Kind of when we're, 20 and 30, that's the top of the heap. By the time we're 40, we begin to question it. By the time we're 50, we realize that we can't do anything unless we've got other people backing us up, especially in this really, really complicated work. And it's even more than there's no shame in that. There's no expectation that we should be working alone. It is a privilege to have other people you can turn to and say, I don't know what the hell to do here. You got any ideas for me? And know that they're going to give you their best information. And you do that simply by forming relationships. So you network with individuals. You achieve some, your relationships will be different with different people. You're always open to learning and understanding what other people do. And some of the collaborations will just emerge naturally because you're all working toward the same goal. You just, maybe looking at it a little bit differently. But if you find yourself trying to do the same thing, you will find roles for each other. I will think in a project, we come up on a blank spot, I don't have somebody to do it. In a large network, I'll usually be able to think of somebody I can call and say, hey, might you be willing to do this piece for me? So there's no magic to this. It's just being genuinely interested in learning about the people that are working in the same framework you are and exploring how you can help each other. And the rest of it can grow from there. Now, the other way is to start, if you are a manager and you have an initiative that's a complicated initiative, you can put out the word and say, listen guys, this has got to happen. I want volunteers. I want people who really think they'd like to be involved in this, because what you're going to pull in change terminology are what we call the early adopters. People who are already have the same vision, are already motivated to do this, volunteering to do it, and you say, let's get together as a group, and your first task is to dialogue the issue. I want to know what everybody thinks about this. Here's the challenge at hand. Have you ever done anything like this before? What did you learn from it? How did it go? What do we need to avoid? Who else do you know? All kinds of data gathering. And you build your collaboration logically by using the input of people in the group. And that, that builds it at several levels. It builds the relationships and rapport. It increases your competence because you're using either consultative or group decision making. I mean, you begin to see how you can apply all of the principles, but you don't have to do it rigidly, like this is step one, this is step two. All right? You really just have to be open to wanting to work with other people and not afraid to say, I need you. I can't do this alone. And most of them are going to say, I'm so glad to hear that because I can't do it alone either. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it's a place to start. All right. Are we out of time?
We're out of time.
All right. Very good.
Please join me in thanking Dr. Judith Bartlett.
We'll be back.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a short coffee break. I'm going to try and restrain myself as an emotive communicator. Not to share my emotions about everything this morning. I'll recap a little bit when we come back, but we're going to take a very quick coffee break, I think 15 minutes. And as you go out, I'll just leave you with one thought, and that is, just going to your question, May, this is a room full of the early adopters in Hong Kong. People are here because they want to collaborate and they care about the children and families of our city. So as you go out and have your coffee, let's talk to each other. Introduce yourself to somebody you've never met before, or maybe you're interested to find out more about what they do. And two other reminders as you enjoy your coffee. We have there's some large pieces of paper with Post-it notes and pens you'll notice on the pillars. We'd love to get your thoughts. So look at the questions, reflect, and just write down quickly what you think, because we really want to learn from each other. And the other thing I would say is if you missed any of the lunch and learns yesterday and you'd like to be invited to future trainings, please sign up. The sign-up sheets are on the registration desk. So have some coffee and we'll see you in about 15 minutes.